and welcome to Salubrious Skin with Dr. Irene. Today we are talking about emotions, and if anyone has followed us on regular podcast shows, you would know that I'm always talking about emotions. I'm absolutely so enthralled by it. I think, we can all change our diet really easily. I think diet's an easy thing to do, but when we're told to change how we think, how we feel, or we mustn't feel a certain way, or we must feel another way, or whatever it is, it becomes hard because who we are is really extended upon how we feel and how we think and the relationships we have around us. So I'm joined today by a wonderful woman who we were chatting before we started, and I really had to stop myself, even though I wanted to continue. Now, Dr. Linda Wilson, a stress management specialist and ex-TCM practitioner, is passionate about how our minds affect our health, and how you have, and you have authored, the book Stress Made Easy, Peeling Women Off the Ceiling, which I absolutely love that title. And you are a wellness practice owner. Welcome, Dr. Linda Wilson.
Thank you, Irene. I know you and I have been trying to tee this up for quite some time, so it's fantastic to finally be here.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time because I know you're super busy. We're chatting about all these things that you've got going on, and I know time is of the essence. So I really appreciate you extending out and joining me on this podcast show, because, when we talk about emotions and stress, it's my belief, being a practitioner now for 15 years, that over 95% of diseases are purely manifested from stress. And I think we all focus on the disease, but we don't focus on where it's manifested from, because it gets hard. People say to me, I can't change these circumstances, I can't change the way I feel, and that's just going to keep feeding into the disease state. So it's something that I always love to talk about and get experts like yourself on the show to give us more insight. So could you perhaps start by explaining what emotions are?
Yeah, sure. So the way that I describe what an emotion is it's thoughts felt in the body.
Okay.
So that's one explanation. The other explanation that I give to people is that it is a range of sensations that are created through chemical release from the brain and from the nervous system. Okay. So emotions are just chemicals translated into meaning. So there's three kind of different ways that you can think about what are our emotions, because the reality is that some of the chemicals that are released by our brain that, for example, we would associate with stress can also be interpreted as excitement. So the only difference between those two emotions is the way that we actually choose to interpret the chemicals that are being released by our nervous system. And this is one of the things that I really try to stress with people, is that so much of what we think and so much of what we feel is based on, one, past experience, but two, interpretation of the events as they're occurring in our life now. And the great news about that is that it means that we can actually change them. So I know you'll have lots of questions in relation to, well, how can we change them? But I'm here to tell people that you absolutely can change them.
Okay, so with emotions, we're all kind of different. Some people, show their emotions really easily. Some people suppress them. Some people aren't aware of them necessarily. They kind of just keep going, and then they might explode out of the blue, thinking, where did that come from? That they've been suppressing their emotions. Is this something we're taught from young? Is this something we learn, or is this just who we are? Is there a person that shows emotions easily, or is it something that we learn from our parents how to do? Where does it all come from?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. The nature-nurture question has been around for a really long time. And what they, at one point in time, they considered that nurture had nothing to do with the way that people turned out. So it was, you were born that way and that was your personality and it was fixed, and that, you come out that way and you go out that way. Okay. Now what they are realising is that actually the nurture part of the equation of our life has a really substantial role to play. Personally, I believe it's more than 50%. I tend towards the 80, 85, even up to 90% of who we are is attributed to the way that we were raised raised, the experiences that we had, the things that we've stored within our system as our memories and as our go-to resources. So for me, the nurture part of it is a huge explanation for why we express ourselves the way we do or don't express ourselves the way we do. And often, anecdotally, you see this a lot with people because, somebody in your family might say, oh, you're so much like your mum, or you're so much like your dad. And so there's that kind of modelling that comes into play as well, because we learn how to be in our world, we learn how to operate in our world because of the ways that the people around us are doing that. And we will either model directly off them and become like them, or we will model directly off them and make a really different choice around how to be in our life. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like people say, oh no, I don't want to be anything like a parent, but them not being anything like their parent is still them reacting to their environment. So, I think it's one of those things that I kind of am very mindful of with my little boy because, especially he's a boy and, you hear a lot about males with depression and suicide and all this sort of thing. And it just scares me because I think it's all centered around their lack of expression of their emotions, not being able to feel everything. So when my little boy gets sad, I completely allow him to be sad because, that's how he's feeling. I don't want to shut him down. I don't want to, that whole big boys don't cry and all this sort of stuff. And it really makes me uncomfortable when I see people do that because you're just shutting that child down to their emotions. And
Absolutely.
I think it's probably more dangerous with boys than girls in a way because it's kind of accepted that girls express their emotions. But
yeah, and I think if you look at chronic disease and the kinds of diseases that manifest, there is some distinction between what manifests for men and what manifests for women. And I do believe also it's often the way that they process or handle their emotions and express their emotions that makes that distinction. So just for your listeners, Irene, my belief is that every illness and disease that comes into our life is as a product, if not completely, certainly a large percentage of our emotional environment, and that's our internal environment, but also our external environment contributes a major piece to how we move through our life from a health perspective. So that's our emotional health, but it's also our physical health. And the reason that I'm so passionate about that is because there was a study that was released a couple of years ago called the ACE study. You may have heard of it. It's to do with a tracking of approximately, I believe it's about 17,000 children. And what they showed is that the emotional experiences of those children led towards them having very predictable health and illness issues. So children who experienced trauma, children who were exposed to trauma or inadequate emotional support, etc., abusive situations, would go on to manifest certain illnesses and at a much higher proportion than, say, someone who didn't experience those kinds of traumas in their life. So we can see from that, and it's not a tiny piece of research. This is a massive piece of research that was conducted over many years because they tracked from childhood. I beg your pardon, they actually took historical records from the people and then tracked it into their existing lives. But the point about it is that the emotional experiences manifest into those people's lives in terms of their physical and emotional health. So our ability to be able to manage our emotions is directly proportionate to our ability to maintain our health and well-being. So if we can manage one, we can manage the other far more easily.
And so how do we manage it? When you're saying manage, are you saying that if we're feeling stress, we need to find an outlet to express that stress, or how can someone manage their emotions that they're feeling?
Yeah, so The very, very first and most crucial part of this is actually our awareness, so developing our awareness. So we need to become aware of what it is that we're actually experiencing. And I don't mean necessarily to be able to label the emotion.
Okay.
Because for some people, if you're working with children, for example, they really struggle to label the emotion. They don't necessarily have the language skills to say, I feel sad or I feel angry in the same way that adults might be able to. So what we need to do is to actually just identify that there is something going on with ourselves physically. And that could be the tightness in the chest, that could be the tension in the neck and the shoulders, that could be skin stuff, that could be snapping at our family members. There's a whole range of different ways that we can see it occurring in our life, but we need to be aware of it actually physically occurring in our body as well. Once we practice this kind of awareness of what's happening within our physical system, we can then start to look at, okay, well, what works for me in terms of shifting that energy, shifting that emotion out of my physical system. And, people do this in many, many different ways. They go and get a therapist to help them. They go to yoga class, they practice mindfulness, they do some of the techniques that I use, which includes a technique called tapping, also access consciousness, hypnotherapy. So there's multiple ways that you can actually work these energy states or emotional states through your system. Exercise is another perfect example of a way to do that. Once we become practiced at how we can shift and move this energy through our system, we become practiced at managing our emotional state. And the more we do it, the faster we pick up on it. And that's the thing. Practice makes perfect in this situation. The more we focus on what is happening within me physically, the tightness in the chest, the shallow breathing because I just can't relax, butterflies in the stomach. Once we really focus and become very aware of those, the faster we become at it, the faster we can move our emotional state.
Okay. So if someone is feeling, an emotional response to an environment that they're in, say, work or school, and they can't necessarily change the environment, but they don't necessarily want to feel that way because it's uncomfortable. Is there a way of doing that, or is someone needs to just specifically remove themselves from that environment? Can you override this feeling if you can't, say, find another job or anything like that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I work with a lot on people is teaching them that whilst we can't always change what's happening externally, so, the cranky boss or the kids at school even, what we can absolutely take control of is how we manage our interpretation of what is going on externally. So remember I said that an emotion is just a sensation, but we've attached a meaning to it.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if I use the kids at school being bullied, what do kids make that emotion mean? And how does it make them feel? And once they have the language to express that, then we can work through how can they change the way that it makes them feel so that the bullying may still continue. We would certainly hope not, but it gives them an opportunity then to not experience it in the same way. So their brain doesn't continue to make that connection between what other children are doing or saying and who they are as a person. So what we do is we change the way we interpret what we're experiencing so that it's actually no longer about us being a particular way or feeling a particular way, but that emotion is placed back out there where it belongs.
And I think it's very, it's amazing how, I can't think of the word, but if you aren't controlled by someone else's actions, and you can simply interpret things in a perspective that doesn't keep you hostage, I guess is what I'm trying to say, then it's very liberating. It's almost like anyone can do anything around me and I really won't have a response to it. It's almost like it's almost like this ray of armor or I don't know how to say it, but when you're speaking, I'm kind of like, okay, well, if someone who I've got an issue with perhaps, and they don't have that impact on me. And it's interesting because I was even saying to my husband one day, I bumped into a friend who I hadn't seen for a while. She can be someone who is abrupt and says things, and I think sometimes she does do it to instigate a response. And she said something, and my husband was like, oh, that was just so rude. Like, why say that? Why even say that? And I said, I actually didn't care. Actually, I didn't care. I didn't care what she thinks. I didn't care. And he's like, no, you should be outraged. Well, I know what she's like. And I know she's probably saying it because she's coming from her own place. So I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And he was upset for me.
Yeah. And I think that is just an amazing, liberated place for you to be. And I really congratulate you for that, because it's when we take on other people's points of view, and let's face it, everybody has a right to their point of view, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has a right to their opinion. We may not like what they have to say, but we don't have to internalize it and make it our problem. So what I often say to people is, you might be listening to or exposed to a point of view that doesn't actually mesh with you that well, but is it actually any of your business? Because really, that person's just having their point of view. You then choose how that point of view impacts on you, whether it stresses you out, whether it makes you feel great, whether it just passes through and is meaningless to you.
Yeah. And I think some level of immaturity in us is that desire to be loved by everyone. I think that's what school usually generates. You want to be popular, you want to be loved by everyone, but that's just not reality. And I think as you move out of school and you realize, I don't care that, 1,000 students aren't loving me, it's perfectly fine. But sometimes I think people stay in that state of mind of wanting to have that positive reinforcement around them. And you have to really find a place of peace that you don't need other people's acceptance to be accepted, I guess.
Absolutely. And then on the flip side of that, being a victim to your circumstances is actually a really powerful place as well. I don't believe that that's a positive, powerful place, but it is a powerful place in that you often get a lot of support, you often get a lot of attention, you often get a lot of resources heading your way that you might not get if you were a strong, independent person who didn't really take on the outside world and its point of view. So often with my clients, we need to also work through what are the benefits to them maintaining a position of being a victim to somebody else's opinion, somebody else's emotional state, and how is it that they can actually grow into their maturity. And I think there is a maturity there is a maturity aspect to it, because after all, when we've had enough experiences, we mature through them and on to something else. And my job as a practitioner is to really support people to decide, is what I'm getting in this particular situation and the emotional state that I find myself in worthwhile for me to stay here? What are the benefits of staying? What are the negatives of staying? And then teaching them how they can change that if that's their choice, because people don't always make the choice to change, and that's completely fine.
Okay, so basically I was thinking as you were talking with regards to as someone who's had an illness since I was 11, and it's almost like it started to have a purpose. So I wouldn't have to feel bad if I didn't want to do something, because I could easily go, oh, my psoriasis is bad, so I can't do it. So then people didn't have to hate me. They just would say, oh yeah, I know that's pretty bad. That's okay, next time. And so I gave it a purpose to exist, which is not what you want. You don't want to give a disease a reason for its existence. But I think it's the same thing when you're talking about that victim thought process. It's you're giving it a reason to exist because you're getting things from it. And as long as you get something from it, it's not going to change.
Absolutely. And it's a really delicate conversation to have, isn't it? Because
Mm,
often people feel like you're then, making a judgment on them, or you're laying blame on them, or you're saying it's your fault or something
yeah.
like that. And actually what I really try to emphasize with my clients is that what your disease is illustrating is that there's something else that you need. So
Mm,
there's somewhere else in your life, your emotional life, your physical environment, where you aren't actually getting what you need, so that
mm.
you no longer need this illness to hang around. And it can be really
That's so
different
true.
things for really different people, right?
Mm,
But often what we find is that the illnesses take on almost like a personality of their own,
mm,
and that our body and our mind are working together to do what they feel is going to get us what we actually need. So, on some very primitive level, it's a survival type thing,
yeah.
but also it's very much about our emotional survival as well.
Mm,
And when we can work out what it is that our illness is achieving for us, as you say, it gave you permission on a certain level to participate or not participate. When we can work out what it is that we're giving our illness permission to take care of in our life,
mm,
we can then make a different kind of a choice. And often that's when you'll see, you know, amazing changes in people's physical health and emotional health, because they recognize that there are other healthier ways for them to get what they need, their emotional needs met, their physical needs met, without having to be sick to do it. And, you
yeah.
know, for some people that generates enormous change. It can generate really big shifts in relationship with other people, really big shifts in relationship with themselves, because they
Mm,
suddenly have this real awareness about, you know, how they've been using their illness to get through life and why it's become so important to them.
mm,
And it's not about judgment. It's really about identifying what is it achieving for you, so
yeah.
we can get those things taken care of in a healthier way.
And that's the thing, I think, when I know when I was at my sickest, I was just so desperate for anyone to help me. I didn't even think I was being judged. I was just simply, just help me figure out why this is happening to me. And I really think if for people to identify the core reason for their disease state, why it's manifested, they need to be open to hearing these things, because
Yeah.
it's not about being judged. It's about bringing your awareness to something. And I even had a patient years ago. I remember she was coming for fertility, but she had some digestive issues. And I know I've spoken about this to, I think maybe in another show, but when her digestion was getting better, she'd always go and do something that would set it back again. And one day it just occurred to me, I go, why are you sabotaging your health? And she goes, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, why am I doing this? And she realized her in-laws were tough to deal with. And if she knew that once they had children, they would come and stay, and she just didn't want that. And I said, listen, you go and speak to your husband about this, because I know he's very supportive. You need to speak to him and bring his awareness to it, because this is going to be a block that's going to prevent this from happening. And she did. And he's like, well, we don't have to tell him then. I don't care if we tell when the kid's 11. And she just fell pregnant instantly, and she's gone on to have 3. I've seen her before
Wow.
every child. But ironically, at the birth of her first child, her father-in-law passes away. So
Mm-hmm.
the fear she had of this person coming and staying for months on end
Mm-hmm.
didn't ever happen.
Vanished anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm.
I mean, the mother-in-law came, but then it was her and her husband, trying to deal with the situation together and bringing that
Yeah.
awareness around it. So
Yeah.
it was just fascinating. She kept, and I was like, great, now we can try. No, why did you just stuff it up? I want to go to the next phase. We're going keep staying here, and we need to move on. And
Yeah.
she was completely on the same page as me, though, so that was a much easier conversation to have, I think, than
Absolutely.
perhaps not.
And I think, you know, we can sometimes become confused with thinking that it's a straight line between
Mm.
these two things. And our brain has an incredible capacity to grab something from here and a memory from there and an experience from here and something from here, and then, you know, clump them into this, mess that then becomes the basis and the full resource for the other things that happen in our life. So it's not a linear type process as to why these things manifest in our life, and it can take some detective work. But if you're really committed to it, it's an incredible journey of awakening and self-empowerment too. It's a really powerful journey to go on. The other thing that I was just going to mention is that often a way that I will broach this conversation to find out what are the benefits that someone is getting from an illness is to ask them, what does your illness force you to do? And so, for example, it forces them to rest, just as one example.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
It forces them to have downtime. It forces them to go to the doctor or go and get a massage or whatever it happens to be. And so when we look at what does your illness actually force you to do, the downtime and the rest are a couple of ones that occur all the time, like very, very frequently, especially with women. And I think it's because we are desperate for rest. We are desperate for downtime. We're working, we're mothering, we might be running our own businesses, or we're carers in some form or another. We've got friendship circles, relationship circles, all of those sorts of demands that we put on ourselves throughout our life. And I'm not saying men don't do this as well, but I am saying women are particularly prone to this. And what they do is give, and they actually fail to build in rest time, downtime, nurture time, take care of me time, and eventually they burn through all those resources, and their body has to come up with a way to slow them down so that they are forced to actually have that time. So, asking yourself, well, what does my illness force me to do, is one way to try and find out what is it that you need to bring into your life, have a structure around it, be disciplined around it, so that your illness doesn't have to take care of that for you anymore.
Yeah. And, it's so interesting. I had a patient once who had a cold or flu or something. She didn't come for that reason, but that specific day she was not well. And I said to her, listen, just go home, lie in bed, have a sleep, watch TV, just really relax, allow your body to heal. And while I was saying this, I was envious. I was like, I would really love to be doing that right now. And you know what? The next day or the day after, I think it was maybe a couple of days, I got a cold. And I felt horrible. And I remember thinking, this is not fun. This is not good to rest like this. It's not actually rest. I can't even sleep. I feel like crap, And I always, whenever I feel tired, I always think, now remember when you had that cold and you felt horrible and you couldn't even sleep? It's not fun. So you don't want to go there. Just rest now, because having that state of health is not beneficial. Because I completely was wishful that I was in her state. And it came about.
And aren't we incredibly powerful beings? You have that thought, your brain goes bing, 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 puts it all together. Fantastic. How about you have a cold and then you'll be forced to rest?
Yeah.
And so, we are very, very powerful at putting out there what it is that we actually need. It's almost like wish fulfillment, right? Or some kind of manifestation excellence that we kind of generate, or we practice and bring into reality. And in the same way that we can create those things, we can also uncreate them. And this is where the breaking down of the meaning of the illness that we're experiencing, or the emotional state that we're experiencing, that breaking down of that state is a way that we can unmanifest and uncreate things that we don't want to have in our life. And I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that we always have choice. So we have choice in the way that we interpret our circumstances, and we have choice in the way that we then respond and react to them. And how brilliant would it have been, Irene, if you could have had that couple of days or some hours off without needing to have the excuse of a cold to actually do it? Because often that's what it is, right? We say to ourselves, well, I can't afford to do it when I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Because I should be seeing more clients, or I should be taking my child to the park, or I should be cleaning out the garage or whatever. What we should be doing is should. No such thing as should. What we could be doing, the choice that we could be making is when we are healthy, when we are happy, when we do have time, we spend time doing more of those things that keep us in that state. And that includes actually practicing the thinking that's associated with that. So practicing the positive emotional state that comes with that. Because as we all know, what we practice and what we focus on, the brain creates more of.
Yeah.
So if we practice experiencing physically, emotionally, experiencing happiness states, we are building up the neurological network within our brain that will generate more of those, because the chemical cascade that we have going on all of the time, those chemicals will move towards the neurological pathways that are the most advanced. How do they become advanced? Because we use them more. So if we spend time creating positive self-awareness, practicing positive memories, practicing positive emotions, and allowing ourselves to kind of roll around in them for a little while, we are going to create more of those states naturally, easily, and without even needing to think about it.
So that's where positive affirmations come in as well, yeah?
Interesting. I love affirmations, but I don't like affirmations all at the same time, and I'll tell you why. The reason that we need affirmations, well, why do we need them? We need them because there's something going on underneath, right?
Yeah.
So we need to we want to bring in some positive because there's some negative going on. So the way that I approach affirmations is very much about deal with the reason that you need the positive affirmation in the first place. So deal with what is behind needing the positive affirmation, and then put the positive affirmation in place. So if a positive affirmation is, I love and respect myself. Well, if you need that as an affirmation, then there's some issues going on with how much you love, approve, and respect yourself. So work out what that is, and then put the affirmation on top of it. Because then what you're doing is you're not just putting a lid on top of something and avoiding or ignoring what's underneath. You're actually creating a clear space, and then you're putting something beautiful on top of that.
And I think it's just, what you're doing is, what you're saying is basic Chinese medicine philosophy of treating the root cause and not suppressing. And I think, I was doing positive affirmations, and I think, like you said, putting a lid on it, I was really great for a few days. And then I can't remember when I even stopped, to be honest. It just stopped. I think things just got in the way, and I just completely forgot about it. And
look,
now that we're talking about it, I've remembered it.
Yeah, right. Well, you see, our brain is amazing in that if you're saying, I love and respect yourself, there's a little part of your brain that might be going, no, you don't. So we're activating that part of our brain, our snake brain or the hind brain that goes, no, you don't. Alert, alert, alert. What are you trying to bring this positive stuff in? That's not true, or it's not true, or it's definitely never been true. And we go into like a stressed type state internally, and then strange things happen, like, we forget to do the affirmations because actually they alarm our system. So another part of our brain goes, you can forget about that because that's actually not true.
It's triggering something.
Exactly. And then we go into a stressed state about it, and then our brain finds a way to avoid that stress because that's its job. So strangely, you forget to do your affirmations. So instead, what I really, and this is the other thing I really want to stress, Irene, is that it doesn't have to be this great navel-gazing, painful dismantling of your whole childhood and, the deep intricacies of every dark thought that you've had. A lot of people traditionally have thought that, they have to go in and like bare their soul and all their secrets and all of the pain and trauma that they've ever experienced in their life. And it does not have to be that way. You and I both know that with TCM, the needles and the movement of the energy does a lot of that work. And with one of my major tools, which is tapping, we're actually using the meridian systems to shift energy through the physical body. And that can happen without this huge introspective, deep and dark, dive into, all of our traumas. It can actually happen with very, very little speaking at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I often do what's called no content sessions with my clients where, they don't necessarily want to tell me. And the truth is, I don't necessarily want to know some of the stuff that's gone on in their life, because who needs that hanging around, right? And we're able to actually shift that through their system without them having to tell me, without me ever having to know. And we can successfully move that. And it's not only tapping that does that, TCM does that. There's so many different ways, especially in this day and age where we're using energy medicine to go way above and beyond what some of the traditional sciences and some of the, say, talk therapy methodologies have ever been able to do, which is,
and I think that's
so
what
exciting.
It prevents a lot of people from dealing with it. I think I've got a patient who, there's a lot of things that she says, I just don't want to talk about, and she just thinks she just needs to keep suppressing it, because she's like, I never can discuss this stuff. It's just too raw, too painful. And if I go there, it's just going to send me into a spiral. So I think a lot of people don't enter that because they think that's probably what they have to do. Go and sit on a couch with a therapist and dredge all this up. And it's almost like a cesspool. Once you start dredging it, it takes you back there and brings up emotions that perhaps people don't want to have to deal with again. So that's really good for people to be well aware of, that you don't necessarily have to talk about this stuff. And that's, I've had patients where they've had treatment and they're crying, because all this stuff is coming out. And, they might have come for asthma, or I remember a lady came for sprained ankle, and she had a miscarriage 25 years prior who she'd never dealt with. And she was crying from that, even though I was treating her ankle.
Yeah.
And, and I just said to her that it needs to be dealt with. 25 years, 50 years, doesn't matter. It's something that you need to heal from. So just let the body do it. You don't have to physically do anything. Just let the body heal. So she was completely surprised, because I think a lot of people from that come and see me, I know obviously you do a lot of the emotional work, but I see various things, and people don't necessarily want to talk about their emotions. I've got asthma, so why do I have to talk about my emotions? Or I can't get pregnant, why do I have to talk about my emotions? And the reality is a lot of the emotions are behind all these diseases. So
absolutely.
It's good for them to know they don't have to talk about it. They can still get benefit from it.
And also, how many clients have you had where they've been really surprised because emotions come up and they just have not expected it, and they don't even necessarily know what it means?
Yeah.
So, I spend a lot of time reassuring my clients that if emotion comes up, there's nothing wrong with that. Better out than in.
Yeah.
That's a phrase that I use all of the time, because it's like a boiling kettle.
Yeah.
If you can let off some steam, then that kettle is relatively safe. But if you don't let off the steam, something's going to blow, and we don't want it to be our clients. And the other thing I was going to say is, it's an incredible privilege to be in the space of a person who's really looking at how they can transform their emotional well-being, their physical well-being, because they're some of the most courageous people that I have ever had the privilege to work with.
Yeah.
And, that's what keeps me doing what I do. That's what keeps me fascinated by the human brain and the impact that stress and emotions can have on our physical health. Because I see this. I see the difference that people can create in their lives when they're prepared to really take themselves on, and it does take an enormous amount of courage for some people.
I
admire that. Yeah.
I think you can get really stuck in your rut and just think that there's no hope. So it is very courageous when people go, I want change, I want to create change, I need something different to where I'm at now because I'm not happy with where I'm at. So it's been amazing. I don't want to hold any of your time. We've definitely gone through a lot more than I had anticipated. And I think it's really important, I guess, for people to understand it's all about awareness first, recognizing what they need to do, and then going about and creating the change. And if they need to see someone who does the energy healing like yourself, then they can get further assistance in that process.
That's it. And the amazing thing is, Irene, there's a lot of free stuff online as well. But just to totally plug myself, if anyone's interested in my book, you can certainly find that on my website, drlindawilson.com. And it's a great introduction to just checking yourself out, and there's some great tools there, and also, you know, find energy healers, find acupuncturists, TCM practitioners, people who do stuff that I guess is considered a little bit out of the box still sometimes, although TCM is now, you know, so mainstream, it's fantastic. But, you know, find something that works for you, whatever that may be for you. I encourage you to go out there and find it.
And I think it's important for people, if they can't resonate with someone that they go to, then find someone else, because I've been to 4 different kinesiologists and I loved 2, and the other 2 I just didn't get anything from. So I think it's not necessarily saying, well, that modality is not right for me. It's that maybe that person wasn't right for me. Maybe the way they do things doesn't resonate with what my body needs. So you just then can find someone else and not necessarily you know, move away from the whole concept entirely.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you so much, Dr. Linda Wilson.
My pleasure.
I'm speechless, because it's just been so amazing to hear everything that you've said, and really got my mind thinking of a few things that, you know, because I think when you were saying about the process of dealing with these emotions, it's a work in progress for forever, isn't it? It's always you're always working at it. You're never just going to simply just go, well, I'm all fixed and I'm fine. So
no, because life happens, right? Life is constantly happening. We're constantly being challenged by life and people's points of view and how that does or doesn't resonate with us. So, also, you know, I do think,
sorry,
I was just going to say that people can get confused with thinking, oh, I'm done now. Well, you're not really done until you close your eyes for the very, very last time, because life continues on. So, you know, and it's an exciting journey. And I think that people, if you can embrace that as part of your life experience, then that's a really positive way to move forward.
And I think other things come up as well. It's like your body will just deal with the most pressing issues, so to speak, and then once that, it's a whole onion concept of peeling away the layers and getting to the core. So I think, to simply say, well, I felt great after this therapy and I was great for a week, but then I felt a bit crap again. Well, that's because other things have come up that you need to deal with. So it is a work in progress, and, you know, getting yourself to that space where you're truly whole. I think that's probably when it's time to
I can tell you and I could talk about this for centuries probably. We'll have to do this again, Irene.
I know, totally. Thank you again for your time, and you know, subscribe to Salubrious Skin with Dr. Irene and hear some amazing presenters, guests that I have on the show, like Dr. Linda Wilson. You know, it's something that we all learn from each other's experiences, and, you know, the amount of wisdom someone has, it's important for it to be shared amongst others so that we can all learn from. And head on over to drlindawilson.com.au.
Just
.com and check out the book. I love that book, and I'll be sure to have you on the show again and dissect your brain for other beautiful bits of wisdom, so to speak.
Thanks, Irene. Enjoy, everybody. Bye for now.